The next person I'd like to introduce to you, I'm really happy to have her here with us today, is Debbie Bielech. She's the founder and executive director of the Children's Organ Transplant Society. She is a living liver donor, and I'll let her explain all the rest. And she's going to tell us about her, her story and the story of herself. Yeah.
Okay, so should I use that or this one?
You can use that. I see that. And
It's on. It's on. Can everybody hear me? Awesome. Awesome. And you're doing the clicking for me.
Yes.
He's helping me. Welcome. Yes, I am the founder of the Children's Organ Transplant Society, but first of all, I'm a mom of a child who received that liver transplant and proud of it, and a living donor. So it's wonderful to be here. Thank you to everybody. The Gift of Life and Beyond is the name of my presentation, and it's telling my story and talking a little bit about hoping to help families and children who are moving into the adult world from BC Children's Hospital or child centers. So I'm starting off with Matt's story, which you will see right here. Matt was, I'm gonna have to put my glasses on, sorry. He was born 10 weeks premature at Royal Columbian Hospital. And on the 5th day of his life, he was transferred to BC Children's Hospital because he developed necrotizing enterocolitis. And I'm sure everybody knows what that is. The bowels basically blow out when they start to feed them. That was the first of his life-saving surgeries. Matt's had many bowel surgeries. And I'm going to read most of it just because I'm not feeling well, and you'll find out why as we move along. He had colostomy, ileostomy. They rehooked him in one of his bowel surgeries. Part of it worked, and then it came apart, and then he ended up with all these, the colostomy and the ileostomy, and they put it back together again, and then he developed a fistula. And when they were feeding him milk one day, I noticed that milk was coming out through where his belly button used to be. So that was really unfortunate. He was on TPN for many months and developed cirrhosis of the liver. Of the 3 children in the nursery at that time, he was the only one that survived who had the same conditions. We spent 8 months in NICU at BC Children's Hospital. Through all those months, and I don't know whether you can see it in the pictures, but he always smiled, and it was just always just so amazing. His spirit shone through from the very beginning. Because they weren't sure whether he needed, Edmonton would just sort of started at that time, their program. We were transferred for assessment at London to Children's Hospital in London, Ontario. There they assessed because they thought he might need a liver bowel. So they assessed him and decided no, they would just go ahead with the liver and hope that once he had a good liver that his bowels would of course heal, and he would go on from there. At the same time, of course, I was assessed as a living donor, and I was assessed as a perfect match for him, although he also was put on the transplant list. From there, we were sent back to Children's Hospital to wait for a little bit, and 2 days later, unfortunately, he started to bleed out badly, really badly. The next morning, he was flown to London. In the afternoon, I was flown on a commercial flight. He received his transplant on November 12th, 1999. He's had many other surgeries since then, all to do with his bowels, actually. All of his bowel issues are his life-threatening issues. He only is on 1 milligram of TAC a day and some magnesium, and all the other meds he takes are all to control his bowel issues. So he's had 2 fundoplications, if anybody knows what those are. And I have seen my boy be put out at least 45 times. Sorry. I always cry a little bit. I'm forever thankful to Dr. Rick Schreiber for advocating and getting us to transplant and all the excellent care throughout the years. Matt has many learning disabilities. Being a preemie and also pediatric liver failure contributes to those issues. He has ADHD, memory issues, and the list goes on and on. He did not develop any fine motor skills. Therefore, his writing, if he tries to print, is like a grade 3 student. Thank goodness for laptops and computers, because they have altered his life and helped him be successful. Gross motor skills, however, That's one thing that he developed as soon as he could run. He has played sports all of his life. He has excelled from the time he excelled in hockey, soccer, fastball, cross country, running, and track. In grade 12, he finished 8th in the province in the 400-meter hurdles. Sorry, wow. And 4th in the 110-meter hurdles. What an accomplishment for a young transplant boy. We've always celebrated his strengths and tried to work on everything that, and we all have things in life we're not all good at, but with him, that was our motto in our family. He continues to play hockey and fastball. At 24, this last August, he participated in the National Fastball Championships and was very, very proud. Next. Sorry, trying to flip here. Matt celebrates his 24th transplant anniversary on November 12th. We dance, we celebrate. We have a great dinners every single year as a family. It's not always been easy for Matt, and I think that there's areas that people forget about. Dating and finding somebody that accepts a young person for lifelong medical conditions, and his stomach that is an absolute railroad from so many multiple surgeries is very difficult through the teen years. Some girls didn't want to date him because of it. But there's always one special person out there. On October 6th, still emotional, Matt proposed to his love, Liz. She said yes. He was very excited. They plan to marry in 2024, 2025. My motto has always been, do not describe my son by his gifts, but by the gifts that have come from it. And there are many, including things like today, but so much of a village that we're surrounded by. Matt's motto is live life to the fullest, no matter what the circumstances are. Next. I donated the left lobe of my liver to Matt. And I'm honored to have been chosen to be his mom and to be able to give him the gift of life twice. It's not been easy. It was exhausting going into the surgery and all of that after spending 8 months in NICU with him 12 to 14 hours a day, because I was going to push him over the edge so that he would live. It was my first surgery other than tonsils, so you can imagine giving part of your liver is quite a big deal. Recovery was hard, and I've had numerous complications. Since then, Dr. Scudamore, which some of you may know, who's recently retired, has operated on me 3 times. I had 2 incisional hernia surgeries completed, and 6 years ago, after suffering from bowel obstructions, he operated again to take down the scar tissue and the adhesions. Unfortunately, this is why I'm sitting down today. Unfortunately, I still suffer from those issues. My body's obviously redeveloped more scar tissue and adhesions, and I suffer from partial obstructions and numerous other issues that will affect me for the rest of my life. Do I regret my decision? Never, not 1 minute. Dr. Sell, if any of you know him from Vancouver General Hospital here, is an amazing GI doctor who takes wonderful care of Matt and I. This is just a little, you can see it here. Where you can see it here. That's just something that we had written out for Living Donation Week. I've already lived a life. Giving my liver meant the world, meant he would live, and that was okay if he went on for the both of us, and I didn't survive, and that's how I felt. In 2020, sorry, you got it? Yeah. I started asking questions of the transplant nurse at BC Children's Hospital. Is there any support groups for families? Is there any support groups for people who are living donors, which of course was quite new at that time as well, and there wasn't. So she gave me some name of some pharmaceutical companies. I phoned them, asked them for money, and that was, you'll see our first picnic here that we started. There's a couple other photos of at the beginning. That is my son with the balloons there, showing off our how much fun he's having at our picnics. We hold lots of Christmas parties, so it's just showing a little bit more what we do. Today, COTS, of course, has grown and is called upon more than ever at any other time in the history of the charity. Our support programs have grown immensely over the years. And of course, there's a lot more transplants, so we have more programs in our family. 90 to 95% of our families struggle financially at this time. And of course, our cost of living has not changed that. Our programs include providing medical supplies, prescriptions, nutrition, nutritional formula, G-tubes and G-tube supplies, catheters, mental health support, transportation and gas support, tutoring, family education, parents' night, which we just had a couple of weeks ago, post-secondary bursaries, advocacy, of course, is a huge part, organ donation awareness, and we also hold a transplant camp that just went back for the first time after that COVID hiatus there, and peer support and family events. We are busy, really, really busy. You're really good at this. What I've learned so much over the 22 years, and I've spoken to so many families. I've learned that it's not always a success story. And my family and myself have certainly traveled that journey through many families who have lost their children or did not make it to transplant, which is really, really sad. So one of the first things I've wanted to highlight is families need to be heard and have their concerns and worries acknowledged, recognizing that all families are different. Some families want details and know the clear picture and the plans for their children as they move forward. Details meaning everything from blood work results to knowing what result of that ultrasound was, everything, absolutely everything. That's who I am. That's who I am. I still look at my son's blood work just to see how he's doing. But others just want to know that their child is okay, and recognizing the differences. And one of the things I really encourage our families to do, as we're talking at our parents' night, is to tell the medical community what they would like from them. What information are they looking for? What feedback on how their children are doing through the process? And it is very indifferent. The impact on the whole family. It's very important to recognize the effects of patient's journey and other family members, parents, siblings, extended family. I have PTSD that I developed after all the journey with Matt. My daughter, my 22-year-old does as well, because she remembers years of her being dropped off at grandma's house at midnight while we were rushing into the hospital for another emergency. But the one thing that families really need is they really, really need connection with others who travel the same lifelong journey with their children. And the children need to connect with others to feel, as my son says when he went to camp, this is a place where I can go where I just feel like a normal kid, Mom. I'm not a medical kid. And those things are really, really important. So the connections are so, so important. The other thing too that I think that I've learned and respect is when Matt's dad and I went into this with Matt, at that time, lots of patients were needing new liver transplants within 8-10 years at the very most. We had made a decision as a couple that if Matt lived 5, 10, or 15 years, that we would be happy with the decision that we had made to move forward with transplant and try and save his life. Not everybody does that. Some families don't want their children to have transplants, and sometimes they make a decision to let their children go, and that too is okay. One of the other things, the need for holistic approach, and I'm sure a lot of you will understand this, one of the biggest challenges of our system and modern medicine in general, I feel, is that patients are not always viewed as a holistic entities. They're viewed mainly as organs and systems, depending on the complaint or the ailment that they're dealing with at the time. But because these children often are seeing multiple disciplines within the hospitals and don't just have the issue of having a transplant, GI doctors, respiratory issues, blah, 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 blah. They're looked at as one entity, but really the whole picture needs to be looked at for these young people and when they come into the adult world, because it's just not one issue. One issue can be compounding and working plus or minus with the others. Transition care. Well, this is why I'm here, is to talk about transition care. I think one of the first things we need to recognize, and I don't have it on the slide, is that when teens are moved over into adult care, that they're not only dealing with the transition of going into a new medical system. They're usually around 18, 19 years old, and they're dealing with transitions of leaving high school, possibly going into post-secondary education. Their social circles are changing. So they go into a new sport or something new that they decide to do. If they have learning disabilities and things, there's a lot of paperwork. There's just so much transitioning at once. We at COTS actually pride ourselves in keeping the kids in our system for a year after they've transitioned into the adult world medically, because we feel that it's just too much. So they would lose our support as well. We do also work with alumni youth as young adults as well. So many of our patients that come into the adult world have multiple learning disabilities and also physical disabilities. When I was at camp, I always go up to camp for a day each year to visit the kids, and I took up a special needs kidney girl just before she's being transferred into the adult world up with me for the day, and it made me realize out of those 18 kids that were at camp this year, it was small because of our strict COVID rules, very strict, that most of the kids have something. They have something they're dealing with, and you can either see it or not. But because many of the issues they're dealing with are invisible, and that make that to the outside world, and that makes it very, very difficult. Mental health too, of course. Now that as a society, we speak about mental health a lot more than we did in the past, thank goodness. But we are seeing experiencing an increased level of mental health issues, especially among our teens. And it's interesting because it depends on the age that the child is transplanted at. Like Matt was transplanted when he was 8 months old, but his last major surgery was 8 years old. And at that time, after that, he said, "Am I going to need a transplant again?" And I said, "You never, maybe." And he said, "Then I'm not doing it." Because, that's how he felt, because it was so traumatic. But many of our teens, if they're having a transplant when they're in, 12, 13, 14, 15, that really plays a different role with them. I think they really get hit really hard with the mental health aspects. So I think it's very important for the transplant teams to be really aware of where that young person is in their journey of mental health, and that's part of the care and how we deal with those young people. Fear. At the Parents' Night, we talked about it extensively, actually, a couple of weeks ago. Children are afraid to come into the adult world. And part of that, I think, is the transition program that's in some of our children's hospitals, is that they're told that they're going to come into the transplant world and be by themselves, and that they won't have support. And that's really, really unfortunate, because that is not true. Many of our young people also have a deep, deep fear of dying. And that, for us as adults, I think if we haven't been through medical, it's hard to even understand where them having that conception. Mortality is something that they deal with their whole lives, whereas most people, don't think about it. Maybe till they're a little older, right? Trauma. Well, trauma is a big one. Some children have lived with a lifetime of medical trauma. They know nothing else. Matt doesn't ever know being healthy. Many of our kids don't know what it's like to have ever truly been healthy and not have to worry about taking meds and telling the next sports director, what your medical condition is, just in case something happens, or the hockey team, and everywhere they go. And many have developed, they have medical trauma, they have PTSD, anxiety, depression, recurring fearful dreams. And I'm going to use the example of my son, because it was 2 years ago when he was 22. It was the first time he told me about his terrible, fearful recurring dreams that he has. So it can take a long time sometimes for youth and young adults to be able to articulate where they're at in that journey and what they're coming to terms with. I see you nodding your head a lot. That's good. That's a good sign for me. And the other thing is what age is appropriate for a young person to be moved to adult care. Chronological age is only one part of the equation. There's many other pieces to that, and each patient needs to be assessed individually before that decision is made, and probably with parent input as well. So recommendations for a smooth transition. This is probably my longest part. I think questions are at the end, right? Right? Okay. One of the things that came up at the Parents' Night this year is parents feel that there is no clear roadmap for how the transition will take place. And that could be partly coming from the children's side of it, and also the roadmap of understanding when they come into the adult world, being explained what this will look like. What will it look like when they move to St. Paul's Hospital or Vancouver General or hospitals? So and the other thing is, the next part, ensuring that information, it's very important that information is transferred to their patient files when they move over into the adult world. Now, I recognize that I think Matt's files, and a lot of them are like, a lot of the kids have files that are this deep, and no doctor or medical professional is going to be able to read all of that and see it all, and it may not all be pertinent as well. But it is important. It was very interesting because we went through this where a doctor had phoned me and asked, it was a transplant doctor actually, and he was telling, and I said something, I said, please, you've got the wrong phone number, you need to phone Matt at this number somehow on the file. And so we got talking a little bit, and I said, well, he said something, and I said, no, but my son has some learning disability and memory issues. And he goes, oh, well, we have a new system, and I don't know what the new system is. Some of you may know. There's some new system within the hospital, and he said that information was not transferred from the old system to the new system to alert the doctors that and the medical people that there were some issues. And that would apply, of course, to anybody whose file was transferred over. Because I said, you'll ask him how the last 6 months have gone, and he'll say everything is great, but actually it may not be true because he doesn't remember. And sometimes he doesn't remember even to put them in his notes in his phone, what has happened. So keynotes on each file to understanding each patient, I think is really, 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 really an important piece for everybody. Allowing a second person in appointments. I'm sure some of you have heard about this. Ensuring patients know their rights is really important, and having a second person with them at appointments if they wish so. So not some young people want to go in, on their own as soon as they move over, and others do not, and may not be ready for a number of years. I know one of our alumni, his mom was saying that he was 25 before he was comfortable going into a room on his own. And also, some of the young adults they're terrified of coming into the adult world, being at a new hospital, working with new medical teams. The other question too that came up at the Parents' Night was, should a representation agreement be put in place for this patient? That might be something that as you work with young people coming into your world, it may be something to keep in mind, because sometimes they just don't have the mental capacity to be able to deal with all the medical terminology and the care on their own. The other issue that I put in here is flexibility for appointment bookings and working with those who are attending post-secondary education and starting to work. There's been quite a few parents that have come forward and talked to me about that, because well, you have to make this appointment on this date. Well, they can't always, if that's an exam day or they're working in a job where they can't get that time off at that time. It's trying to work around that schedules a little bit as well. Ensuring clarity and communications. Please make sure that you speak to the patient and not to their support person. That's how they learn. That's how they're going to learn to advocate for themselves, and that's how they're going to learn to manage their own medical. Be clear and concise to the individual abilities of the patient. So some of the patients that are coming in with the learning disabilities and other disabilities may not be able to understand some of the medical terminology, whereas others will. So it's just learning a little bit about that patient. Another thing that I've seen recently and was told about was that their child received a follow-up after their appointment, their annual appointment, and on the email or the letter, it said a yearly cancer screening. So that child or that young adult really had great anxiety. What should have been written was yearly skin cancer screening. So the wording of that, so you've got these young people who have dealt with trauma their whole lives, and now the C word comes up. They're very aware they have to wear sunscreen. They've been talked about it their whole life. But if it just says cancer and not skin cancer, it can send them into real turmoil. So that's just something as an example of being careful with what's written. Treating patients with equity, ask the patients and their families what they need to be supported, how they can be supported. And that is also to do with, some of the learning disabilities, the trauma and things like that. Do they need, is it more comfortable for them to walk around while they're at the appointment in the room with the doctors and nurses, or do they need the lights dimmed, or do they like to sketch while they're listening? Some of those things are really, really important for coping with the continual medical world, and not assuming everybody's the same and that their needs can change throughout time. I know all of you in the medical world are taxed for time. We're short of doctors, we're short of nurses and everything else, but it is quality of care. Yeah, I think that's it on that. Consistent care. One of the biggest complaints I hear about is patients are going into transplant clinics and seeing different doctors every time. And I know that I don't feel that personally, and that this is patient-centered care. And is it possible for a change? I'd love to hear from you guys if it is possible for this change. It would certainly improve the experience for the patient, reduce anxiety, and reduce ongoing mental health issues. Many of our kids see multiple disciplines. My son, when he was first transferred over, saw 5 different disciplines at VGH. I think he's down to 4 now. So that's we're not just, it's not just one place they're going to multiple. But I did want to mention that once we got the GI doctor sorted out, my son's experience at VGH has been exceptional. All of his doctors that are assigned to take care of him have really, really done a great job. And he had made sure that he knew I was making the speech that I mentioned that, because he's really, really happy with his team that is working with him. That's kind of the end, but every moment is a gift of life. Thank you to all the healthcare professionals in attendance today. I'm honored to have been able to come and speak to you. And I hope some of the information I've passed on is valuable.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's really good to hear. Now, do you have any questions here for Debbie? And there's a Slido over here. Don't know if this is, this looks like an older questions from before. No, this is all. One thing I'm wondering, we sort of have a mixed group here, and there's also people watching virtually. So some are more from the donation side, and I'm sure I imagine there's some from the transplant side. How else have you? This is a great presentation, and
thank you.
Have you had an opportunity to present it to the different clinics and things like that that your son that your son goes to, or to help with it? Yeah.
Oh no, not specifically, but I certainly take pieces of that as what we have spoken with.
Yeah. I think it's really, really important. Jordy?
I'm just curious, about your experience with transition into adult care, and how did you what were your feelings leading up to that? How did you what was that kind of negotiation? Some more autonomy in his own care. process of kind of letting go as well? How does
Yeah.
that work?
Well, first of all, he's the second of three children. So letting go of teens is really important. We always have to let go a piece at a time so they be able to survive in the adult world. Of course, I think that's one of our really important jobs. I did notice that the beginning appointments were really, really important because the questions that the doctors had, like the GI doctors, the transplant doctors, the respiratory, the kidney doctors, everybody, they had questions that he could not answer because it would have been in that stack of information. So the first couple of years, I think I was certainly with him, especially with the GI team. Because of that. But then it just sort of naturally, starts to move and encouraging them. He still phones me and go, Mom, what do you think about this? Should I talk to them about that? And I'll go, yeah, of course, or whatever. But but they're all at a different pace. Like I said, that one boy was 25 before he wanted to go by himself or talk by himself.
I'm just checking the slide over there. I think, are there any other questions here for Debbie? Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for coming and sharing that story.
Thank you.
It's so important for us to hear about this and appreciate
Yes,
it.
and thank you for all your great care and all the work you do. We're forever thankful.